me tell you about a friend. It's Craig LeBlanc where the good times never end. Talking Parks and Rec, it's a show you gotta know. Welcome one and all to the Daily Parks and Rec Show. It's the Daily Parks and Rec Show.
But the interesting thing is, if you look at the data points again, it's kind of shifting backwards again since COVID, as people have gone on with their regular lives again. How do you put it on the forefront? So to that point, yes, we know the data points that do show the need for parks and recreation across the board, whether it's a small community, rural community, or even a major city. But how do you get that idea to stick? That's the hard part, and that's been the challenge that I feel, at least from my perspective.
Welcome to the Daily Parks and Rec Show's Leadership Series. Today, we're joined by Seve Ghose. In this episode, we uncover the expansive role of parks and recreation within our communities, explore how parks and recreation are increasingly recognized as vital providers of preventative health and wellness services, and how they serve as crucial emergency preparedness centers during crises, aiding in triage, housing, and vaccination efforts. We'll highlight the diverse services offered, from life-saving aquatics programs to intergenerational activities that build community and combat loneliness. Discover how these facilities also act as significant local workforces and foster innovative partnerships, ultimately uplifting communities and enriching lives every day. Let's dive in.
All right, this is Craig LeBlanc again, the doorman, with the Daily Parks and Rec Show Leadership Series, with one of the great leaders of Parks and Rec that is dedicated probably about 10 lifetimes to Parks and Recreation, and has been just one of the forward-thinking Parks and Rec professionals that was one of the early guys that I was told by 4 different people, you have to talk to Seve. And so he has been a great contributor and really helping us to build out the foundation of the Daily Parks and Rec Show. So really appreciate you coming back on the show again today, Seve.
No, thank you. Morning, Craig. Yeah, happy to be back and happy to share more. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and kick things off with our latest promotion of what we're trying to accomplish with building a media company exclusively for Parks and Recreation and the Parks and Rec community and industry, and then we'll be right back.
Welcome to DPRS Media Co., the first media company built for the people behind the Parks and Rec community. We don't just cover on Parks and Rec, we elevate it, we amplify it, we honor it. At the heart of everything we do is one mission: to serve the public servants, the professionals who design, maintain, and lead the parks that shape our communities. Under the Daily Parks and Rec Show, we produce 6 powerful platforms. Leadership in Parks and Rec, a spotlight on directors, superintendents, and visionaries shaping the future of public spaces. Facility maintenance, where the boots hit the ground, a deep dive into the systems, crews, and craftsmanship that keep our parks clean, safe, and beautiful. Young Professionals Network, shining a light on the next generation of Parks and Rec. Students, interns, and mentors sharing how we build a legacy together. Youth Sports Mastery, sponsored by National Academy of Athletics. This series is for coaches, parents, and rec leaders working to make youth sports fun, fair, and meaningful again. The Rec Room, hosted by the passionate leaders of Henry County Parks and Rec. This show brings frontline energy and real-life stories from the field. And the weekly Parks and Rec Post, our official newsletter delivering stories, insights, and community wins every week. We are DPRS Media Co., LLC, a media company with a mission to uplift the professionals who serve every community, every park, every day.
All right, so hopefully that helps new listeners understand our mission, what we're trying to do, what we've accomplished so far. And we even just recently, last Thursday, recorded our 200th episode. So we created a little thank you to everyone that has been with us the whole time. So let's go ahead and run that, and then we'll come right back with Seve.
From a simple mic in a rec center to a full-scale media company for the people who power our parks. 200 real stories, 5 original shows, and more to come, with one powerful mission: to lift up the voices of Parks and Rec professionals across the country. From maintenance crews and young interns and youths who love sports, to directors and public servants making a difference. We've built a platform that honors the unsung heroes behind every clean trail, every weekend tournament, every safe, welcoming park. This milestone isn't just about the content, it's about the people, the passion, the purpose. To every guest, listener, and supporter, thank you. The next chapter starts today. This is DPRS Media Co. Media for public service.
All right. So big thank you to all of our guests that have come on the show and have contributed to the content that we now have forever in our content library. And I have, just to let everyone know, we have officially become part of a lot of Parks and Rec professionals' daily lunch and coffee, and you name it. Because for those of you that hadn't noticed, social media is somewhat dead, and it has transitioned into what's called interest media. And it's where you just consume the media on the topics that you are interested in. And I am guilty of this myself. I have about 3 or 4 topics that I go deep on, and I find the channels and content creators that create on that topic. And that's where I get most of my media consumption from. So in a very similar vein of logic, creating something for the Parks and Rec community, we have already become how they consume content. So that's kind of the framework that we're creating this media company around. But I have an important topic that I wanted to discuss with Seve, which is, and this is kind of broad strokes, but in general, we are hopefully transitioning from Parks and Recreation being a non-essential, discretionary, first on the chopping block kind of when it comes to funding from a city. And we're starting to see how Parks and Recreation really is, and let me get the wording right. I'd sent it to Seve earlier. Me and Dr. Joshua have been kind of wordsmithing this a little bit, but perhaps shifting this more to, let's see. I said Parks and Recreation are providers of essential preventative healthcare and wellness services in their communities. And I think Dr. Joshua kicked it up a notch for me. He said, let's see, Parks and Recreation providing essential healthcare and wellness services. So first thoughts on that, just, where we are, where we came from when we were like during the pandemic, first on the chopping block to cancel. And then I think through the pandemic, it opened our eyes to say, wait a minute, this is actually fairly essential to the health and well-being of our communities. Any first thoughts on that?
No, thank you, Craig. Good morning. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we do all know inside the profession that it is an essential service, and it did show its mark during the COVID pandemic, But the interesting thing is, if you look at the data points again, it's kind of shifting backwards again since COVID, as people have, gone on with their regular lives again. So how do you put it on the forefront? So to that point, yes, we know the data points that do show the need for Parks and Recreation across the board, whether it's a small community, rural community, or even a major city. Green spaces do help with health outcomes, for all ages, 0 through 99 plus. But how do you get that idea to stick? That's the hard part, and that's been the challenge. I feel, at least from my perspective. In over 30 years in the profession, is how do you make it stick? We all agree when we sit in a round table, we have those discussions, politicians, others, we all agree, yes, we're essential, but then as soon as we leave the room, somehow, other priorities take over, and Parks and Recreation still ends up on the chopping block. So
yeah. Well, I think there are some shortcuts within the industry, because the industry provides so much for a community. If you look at everything from, aquatics, youth sports, you got senior care, you've got special events, and so you could say Parks and Rec maybe provides like 20 services in general. And I know they provide more, but I think some of the shortcuts are like senior services. Many times this is the only sense of community. These people are alone, stuck in their home. You're able to often get picked up by a little bus, and then they can bring them and provide them food. And then the other short putt one for me would be during a crisis. Often parks and rec facilities are the only facilities that FEMA or the like Red Cross or anything where you have a base camp
Yeah.
to do operations during a crisis like a huge fire or a flood or something like that. The city really doesn't have any other facilities at their disposal, even remotely close to the capacity that Parks and Rec runs to be able to, in an emergency, host these types of people coming into a city.
And that's exactly true. So the reality is that, in the emergency preparedness plans for most cities or communities, those facilities are typically in parks and recreation, which become triage centers and so on.
Mhm,
Um, and they have been taken advantage of in that sense during COVID. I mean, many cities, I can speak to Colorado when I was there during COVID, a lot of the gyms or gymnasiums became, or the rec centers became COVID centers, not just for the vaccinations, but even for housing the unhoused populations and so on,
mhm,
bring them shower opportunities and things like that. So yes, they do get used for specific purposes, but how to
mhm,
keep that in the limelight as far as offering that whole array of services throughout the year. And again, you're talking about older adults, senior services. The challenge with that is again, the timelines. We don't tend to expound the story further and further. So typically, seniors might come to a senior center or older adult center from say 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But then
mhm,
many of these centers, which also have similar amenities to a rec center, are shut down at 5 p.m. I think those centers could get more use. Maybe more people would talk to them or speak to them, so to speak, if they were used between say 5 and 10 p.m., which would be the normal hours in a typical rec center, because
right.
I'd still have a pickleball court or a gym or a fitness center, and actually could increase traffic. So again, sometimes I go back to what I've shared before on your show. Sometimes are our own worst enemy. Sometimes, and we don't tell our great story. That we have these great facilities and amenities, and it doesn't do any community any good to have a great facility or an older adult center, senior center shut down after 5 p.m., even though the seniors might not be there, but it could be used by others in the community. So have that interconnectedness, and many seniors or older adults may use it too if it was available after 5. But we kind of tend to stick in our little boxes, so to speak, and I think we need to branch out a little bit if we can to help with that particular cause, and also creating intergenerational programs. So
Mhm,
when kids get out of school at 3:34, what says they don't get in touch with their dad or grandpa or great grandpa and show up at the older adult center and partake of other activities? Even after school activities could be held at the senior center too. So, and again, those things or those activities help health and wellness, because it takes away from the loneliness felt by many older adults, as we know, as a fact. And they also get some exercise. Maybe they can walk around the perimeter. They walk in the gardens outside, or walk in the park that might be close to the center, and so on. So again, thinking about interconnectedness, and that's how I always think about connecting the dots. It's not just any one facility or one program in isolation, and that's
mhm.
where the challenge is across the board, because we get so busy in our day to day that we tend to just concentrate on our one thing or the two things. And if there was a way to connect and kind of just relax and spread the wings a little bit, I think we as a profession could do much better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it's even might do good for Parks and Rec professionals to realize that they are operating everything they do out of an emergency preparedness center.
Yep. Mhm.
That this is where everyone kind of the leadership team on handling and even outsourced federal government agencies will come and run their whole facility or their whole operation out of these facilities.
Right.
And when they're not being used in that emergency capacity, then we can run sports and senior centers and other stuff. Because I was in the middle of Katrina
Yep.
um, when it hit New Orleans, and next door I had another home in Baton Rouge, and all the rec facilities were just jam packed with refugees that had left New Orleans, and they set up cots, and the Red Cross came in, and FEMA came in, and of course we shut down youth sports during that time, but
Sure.
But you wouldn't want to shut down all fire stations unless there's a fire, because then when there's a fire, there are no fire stations that can respond.
Right.
And if in that thought process. But anything else to say on emergency preparedness? And then I'd like to talk a little more about, the health and well-being
Yeah,
of the
well, I
community.
think the emergency preparedness, yes, the facilities are always available and ready, and I think Parks and Recreation professionals are very, empathetic, sympathetic to that cause, and I think they jump to it, and they do provide the highest level of service across the board in any
Mhm,
state that I've been in and I've been experienced in. And that is the case, and so we're always ready to go. We're very much a public servant. I see your messaging on your show, and
mhm,
we're very much into that public service mindset. If I could add one more thing to this as a segue into the next part of the conversation. Last week I had a group of high school students, about 36 of them, from a marginalized neighborhood here in San Francisco,
mhm,
just looking to see what Parks and Recreation, because I still treat our facility and amenities here as a smaller Parks and Recreation system, and just sharing that, not just here in San Francisco, but overall in other cities. In Parks and Recreation, we employ all professions, basically A through Z. I mean, if you look at from
mhm.
arborist to a zookeeper, you might have that in a particular city or a community. So when you say 20 professions, I think you mentioned earlier, I was going to say maybe at least 26 professions, because I go
Yeah,
with each of the letters on the alphabet, that we could have a profession that's tied to Parks and Recreation in many ways. And I think, again, telling that story, sharing that story, because we get relegated many times even in the day to day. So even if a high school student doesn't, I mean, the, the the top refrain from most of the students was, "Well, I didn't know you could do that," or "I didn't know Parks and Recreation was about that." Oh, so I asked rhetorical questions like, "Oh, how do you think the grass gets mowed?" Or "How do you think when you show up
yeah,
to play basketball in the gym floor is clean and safe and all of that, and the lights are on." So then it kind of got them thinking, but again, it's for that moment. So again, storytelling becomes a major piece of
yeah.
this.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you think about any facility, whether it be commercial or industrial, residential, or, whether it's like a government-owned operation, the whole facilities maintenance side workforce has to be present regardless of, who owns it. And
Correct.
so Parks and Recreation, being under the municipal government, has to have people that are maintaining these facilities. So that's a
Correct.
local workforce that you can, keep your workforce local. That's providing jobs for the community.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd like to kind of transition more into this health and wellness piece, because I think there really is an opportunity for health and wellness professionals to do preventative work, so that we're not waiting until people are alone, depressed, overweight, sick, and in trouble with the law.
Yep.
Before and that At that point, the hospitals and the police are dealing with neglect for decades, but Parks and Rec can prevent those populations from ever showing up with the needs of a depressed, sick, alone person. Um, and so it's kind of hard to measure the success there, because they're just, if the Parks and Rec's doing its job correctly, we're taking kids off the street at a young age and giving them something, giving them purpose to work on, so that they never show up at the police department's doorstep or the hospital's doorstep.
And so that's a challenge, I think, a societal challenge, and especially in Parks and Recreation too. What I've experienced in the 30 plus years is that we tend to address the symptoms, and not the
Mhm.
root cause. And you have
Yes.
heard this expression, I'm sure, in other professions or even in Parks and Recreation. And that's what I was touching on earlier, that we tend to focus in on one or two things and not look at the big picture, stepping
Mhm.
back. And we don't need to find solutions to everything, but if we can step back and kind of think the whole picture through and connect the dots, I think if we can get to the root cause of some of these things, I think that's the big challenge. So to your question, yes, health and wellness, I mean, especially in marginalized populations, I mean, that's where the numbers are, that do not have that level of service that well-to-do communities do, or suburban communities do, and so on, because they have the resources, financial resources, or even some
Mhm.
facility and amenity resources to avail those opportunities, whereas in the poorer communities, economically challenged communities, that's not the case on a daily basis. From transportation to access to, just even having the swing set or the playground that allows for that child to, enjoy the outdoors at age 3, and so on,
Mhm.
and not have to wait till they get to be 5 years old, go to school, and then experience that, and so on. So where do you have the building blocks? I think is the piece, and I think there was a shift, towards doing a lot of that. But again, post COVID, I feel the whole profession has changed quite a bit. Now it's a
Mhm.
survival mode a little bit also, and with the cuts and the conversations that are happening around the country, that's a big challenge also. But I think at the end of the day, yes, health and wellness is a major piece. There was an organization called Park RX America. I don't know if you recall that. Dr. Robert Czar started
Mm.
that in Maryland, in the DC area. And the idea was that if we could get doctors to prescribe a walk in the park for simple daily ailments, because we tend to take pills a lot, and sometimes the
Right.
pills make things worse, because then the body is dependent on other things. Whereas a walk in the park every day might actually fix your basic ailment, and that was his premise. And there were many of us that bought into his idea, but it's such a hard job to break into the medical field to convince doctors, write a prescription that says basically you need to walk 10 minutes a day in a park.
Yeah.
Even the patients are so attuned to the fact that, oh, I need a pill, doc, I need a pill, so that's what we're attuned to. How do you change that? And I can tell you that he was not as successful as we would have liked him to be, in recruiting doctors. He himself is a medical practitioner, doctor, and he was having a hard time because, as you know, on the medical side, not I don't know the full facts, but the idea is that many of these pharmaceutical companies, they manufacture drugs, they give it to the doctors, they're supposed to prescribe that, and they get paid for it accordingly, and so on. So it's a vicious circle. But then how do you, on the one side of the mouth, accept the money, and then the other side, you saying I'm prescribing a walk in the park at the same time instead of the
Yeah.
pill, which I get money for. So it's a challenge. I think he was
Yeah.
able to recruit about a dozen doctors in the DC area that did that, especially for older adults, because they always have a few or a few more than typical daily ailments than average adult would. So
Yeah. And I think this may go back to the Hippocratic Oath that all doctors take and should take seriously, that we are, and doctors do make money. And of course, they have to pay the bills and keep the
sure,
hospital and their
yeah,
practices open. But your primary focus should be to heal the patient, not
yes,
to just make money on prescribing them. And so sometimes you can have a conflict of interest because you can't really make money on prescribing someone to go walk 10, 20 minutes a day.
right. No, exactly, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and then the other piece is starting young, as I was touching on earlier, and especially underserved neighborhoods. Even starting simple walk programs for little kids. Like when they're 3 years old, ready pretty much to take direction, or even with adult supervision, parental supervision, even walking around the playground or something, creating programs that I think those programs will have a longer lasting effect than, I mean, in my view, than a soccer club, in a soccer field, because the soccer field club, that group is going to be there no matter what. Whereas the other program is dependent on outside, a little bit of hand holding, cajoling, and leading, by the
mhm,
agency. So I always ask, parks and recreation professionals to put more focus on areas of need rather than the ones that are actually succeeding. The great programs will continue to be great, or at least function at a high level. It's the programs that are on the marginalized areas that need
mhm,
that initial push, and also continual push and guidance,
yeah,
for years to come, until the neighborhood changes, potentially, hopefully it changes due to the Parks and Rec programs. If not, you still have to put dollars and effort into it. So
yeah. And so we probably need to get, like, maybe some therapists or psychologists, on the show to maybe dig deep into why parents, enroll their children in sports, in, healthcare, or you could say, I don't know many doctors or people in the medical industry that aren't regular attendees of some type of health club, some type of a yoga studio, some type of run club. Um, and then they enroll their children in sports from the earliest ages they can get them in, even through college. And so, why would we not think? What are the reasons we're making that decision? Maybe we can talk about, why do you think parents are enrolling children in either private clubs or sports, and what's the benefit that they think their children will get from that?
Well, I think that's a good story, because, or the tagline, so to speak, because that's that transition that has taken place over the last 20, 25 years. And that's a tough one, because a lot of parents think, their kids are going to be the next Olympian or the next NBA or, WNBA player and so on. How do you get away from that mindset, knowing that, there's only 12 to 15 players on a team, and you have probably a million trying out for that spot, and so on. But the challenge is also, I think I'll use soccer as an example. So I follow soccer very closely. I've coached it to a high level and so on, and I understand. And in fact, I was in the very forefront in Ames, Iowa, in the mid '80s, starting the Ames Soccer Club because it was an international community, a college town, Iowa State University. Our teams were awesome. We used to beat teams from Des Moines and other places, the bigger cities, uh, with high scores. And really, what do you call like it was zero challenge games. I mean, we just
Mhm.
won every game we went to. But in 5 to 8 years, so in the mid '90s, all of that changed. What happened was it became typical parent run organization, so it was all about winning, not learning the skills.
Mm.
So even a lot of our good players from Ames were now playing in the so-called clubs in Des Moines, Iowa, because they were being asked to play, and supposedly they had a higher level coach. Just because they were certified didn't make them a higher level coach, but the point was they were winning. So winning became the mantra of, like, oh, that's where. So parents have that guidance and the feeling that, oh, it's all about winning and getting to the top, that takes them to the next level. And
Mm.
my argument on soccer is that if you look at the level of soccer in the US on the national team and all that, the reason we're struggling, I think that we've kind of missed that gap where instead of the soccer clubs, the MLS clubs running the full coaching programs like they should, or like they do in other countries, we should be doing the same here and not
Mm.
allowing these so-called clubs to poach players and become more of an internal competition rather than the growth of soccer.
Yeah.
And they have not picked up any skills. Sure, they're winning because we have the speed and the stamina, but skill-wise, soccer in the US is very close to a zero. I hate to say that. I know people are going to be upset about it, but if
Uh-huh.
you look at the youth level, we have the speed, the stamina, the size, but no skills.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. And I think it's that across the board, across other sports too, because we tend to just jump that gap and get to the place where it becomes a competition and win at all costs thing. So,
Yeah.
and that's the failure on, I think, us part. I'm a parent too, and I've seen that, because my kids like, oh, Dad, I want to sign up for that club team, and I try to tell them I'd rather find the coach that knows the sport and you learn the basics from that person, and then you get onto
Yeah.
because going to a private club or a club is not going to get you to that level necessarily. So. And
Yeah.
that's why I also go back to Serena Williams and Venus Williams. The reason, forgetting even their parental involvement, which was important, but they were coached locally, in their community. That's where they learned the basic skills. And I always harken back to that that's where the future is. And that's where Parks and Recreation comes in, because guess who runs those courts or those fields as Parks and Recreation programs.
Mm.
And somehow we've kind of rented those fields and the courts to private clubs that use our fields in their name, and then Parks and Recreation is forgotten because those parents think they're being coached by the ABC club, and the
Mhm.
ABC club fields are the ones we play on. But actually, those fields are local Parks and Recreation fields, Parks and Recreation gyms,
Yeah.
and so on. And so again, it's a dichotomy here of a lot of these thoughts that have occurred in my head over the years. That where do we, have an impact? And I think it's again telling our story and making the community understand, or letting the community understand that it is Parks and Recreation where the fun begins. The fun should stay, and then we could even get to that next level of high level skills and so on,
Yeah.
in the Parks and Recreation system. So
Yeah, and I think a sport that really does well inside of Parks and Recreation, staying focused on the skills, is aquatics and swimming and teaching the life-saving skill of being able to swim. I think most parents enroll their kids in swimming, never thinking they're gonna get some swimming scholarship. Um, I know I've been in the pool enough times to see this 70-year-old lady blow past me like I'm stopped, and knowing that she was a collegiate swimmer, and I in no scenario in life was I ever going to be able to compete with her. She's still beating me, 30 years older than me.
yep.
Um, and so I think it's important to focus on, and I'll give you a great example. I coached cross country. Well, I coached track for 9 years and I coached cross country for 5 years. And I do not have the body type of a cross country runner. Um, and neither do my children. I had 8 of my own kids in cross country, not because I thought they were going to get a scholarship, but to this day, they still run to stay in shape. Having an active lifestyle is
is a skill that will serve you throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And none of them got on a championship team, and this was, like, when they were 5th to 8th graders, so just a
Yeah.
great example of how there's so many life skills that are learned by playing youth sports that have nothing to do with academic scholarships in athletics.
And to that point, if I could add, like I've always pushed for this in the places I've worked, is especially swimming. You brought up swimming, aquatics as an example. Is that, if you look at most of these, again, I concentrate on the marginalized or the underrepresented communities. What's the number one cause of death, especially if you're by a body of water, river, lake, ponds, and so on, is drowning.
Mm,
In marginalized populations. So the program we always pushed for, but again, it was short-lived because you need a cultural shift in the organization to make that happen and stick. Is, say, offering free swim lessons to all third graders, because third graders
mm,
at age, say, 8 or so, they're able to take instruction. You could even start at second graders, depending on the community
mhm.
you're in, and make that decision. But offer free swim lessons so that maybe 2 to 4 lessons, so allows the person at that age, they're very good to quick to learn. They at least stay afloat, they don't drown, things like that. And you basically work with the school district and say every third grader comes through your system. That way you get to also show off your facility that you have a
Yeah,
aquatic center. And then the kids rotate through a 6 week or a 4 week, however you design that program. But it's free just by showing your school ID, or even come with the school group. You get in and get free lessons. And that also, they also become your proponents for your programs to sustain the programs in the future. Like, oh, guess where I learned how to swim? So actually in Oregon, in one of the places I worked, we actually gave out the little like the golf towels, the small towels, uh, as a gift for coming in and signing up for the program, or showing up for the program, that said, I learned how to swim at our facility, the name, and so on. And so again, simple things like that, then the kids remember that as a third grader. Oh, guess where I learned how to swim? Dad, mom, grandpa,
yeah,
let's go there, let's do this, let's do that. And again, creating that full cycle or circle is very important. And again, talk about life-saving skills, and all that is very important, or life skills. Some sports that you could do all your life, swimming is one of them, obviously. And
mhm.
most other sports, I mean, running and jogging and all that, absolutely, yes. Cross country, I mean, it's awesome that you could do that. And again,
Yeah,
uh, sometimes we don't tell those stories often enough. And
yeah,
we concentrate on the one off. Like even here in San Francisco, our ice arena here that we have on our campus just produced the current women's world champion, Elisa Liu. But
wow,
but the facility and others didn't brag about it till she was in the news, and oh, she just won the world championship. So okay. And then 2 weeks ago, 60 Minutes was here doing a story on her and her family, because they're first generation immigrants from China and so on. So there was a great story and tie-ins to sacrifices and all that to have her get to that level. And even though she's been in the sport for about 8 years, she retired supposedly at age 19, and then she came back, or sorry, at age 16, and then came back at 19.
yeah,
So a lot of these stories are there, but they're one off. And where we missed the boat, I think, in Parks and Recreation, is that how do we make it ongoing and regular? And that's
yeah,
the challenge. Yeah. So I'm
yeah,
glad that you have a show like yours, that you're doing this. That I think we
yes,
can, from various backgrounds. I mean, I'm speaking from my experience in 6 states, but others can speak to a rural community, or a park district, or a larger system like Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, and so on, where nuances are different. But I think at the end of the day, Parks and Recreation can play a big role. So
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really important for us to have these discussions because we have roughly 12,000 Parks and
yeah.
Rec departments across America. And I would say each director is how often would you say that you're in front of elected officials or stakeholders throughout a given year? Is it 12 times a year, 30, 50 times a
Yeah.
year, trying to
No,
deliver the message
I,
we're
I would
talking
I would go less than 12, if at all. Maybe I would say 0 or 1, usually.
about? Wow.
Usually if there's a controversy, then you show up, or you're asked to be there by your city manager or the
Mhm.
mayor, depending on what system you're in. But no, I would say it's less than 5, if that. There are
Wow.
very few cities where Parks and Recreation gets to be in front of the public, so to speak, in a forum like a city council meeting. Or when you do have your board meetings or advisory board meetings, but those do
Mhm.
not count because not too many people from the public come, and it's not put on the local access channel TV, that many people
Yeah,
still watch, in many
yeah.
communities. So yeah, I would say it's less than 5. Yeah.
Now you've got these council members and mayors that, have all the departments in front of them seeking funding.
Yeah.
And so it's the police chief just went, the fire chief just went, and now here comes the director saying, "I need $50 million for this master plan, and here's why we're valuable. Go." So sometimes that might not be, but you're saying like every other year that you're doing this, or?
No, you do it every year, maybe, once. But if there's nothing controversial, like if there's not a major cut involved, and you're speaking on behalf of the department that please don't cut us and that kind of thing. And if it's just a regular accepted budget, then you're basically just renewing your budget, and you're not going there before the council because there's no questions to be answered. Typically, again, I'm sharing that it's typically the case. And talking about police and fire, so the one big trick I learned about 20 years ago, or 21 years ago in Portland, Oregon, you talk about police and fire. So this is where I learned about connecting the dots. So I started being good friends, in a good way, professional way, with the police chief and the fire chief in Portland. And especially the police chief in Portland in those years, early 2000s, there was a lot of juvenile crime, just petty crime, stealing, this kind of thing. But they would hide their guns, and these guns were never used, but they were used as a prop to basically, commit the crime. Our staff would find them in the bushes, because in Oregon, rhododendron bushes and things grow of that nature, that plants of that type, grow very quickly and very well and very thick. So working with the police department, we're basically able to implement CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. And instead of the kids throwing the guns in those bushes, they couldn't do that anymore, because the gun would be quite visible to any passerby. The juvenile crime got basically diminished to zero. And what we did was worked with the police department. And guess what? We didn't have to pay a penny from our department. The police took charge, because they like to brag about how they helped reduce crime in any community. So the chief,
right.
But I got to stand with him and said, there was a good true partnership with Parks and Recreation, that we're able to solve this crime in North Portland when I was there from 2004 through 8. I mean, again, connecting the dots, maybe even having others come on board as partners that tell your story for you, and you don't have to do that. And especially a police and a fire chief, if you can get them to do that for you. And then the second story on that is the one in Davenport, Iowa, where we were able to take over a decommissioned fire truck, full-size 40-foot or 33-foot fire truck, with all the compartments emptied out. But now we stock them with, art supplies, hobbies, sports items, musical instruments, and other things. And we drove around different parts of especially the marginalized communities, on a set schedule, summer months. And it became such a big program after the first year. We were even picking up the meals from the school district, so the families didn't have to go to the school district to pick up their meals, the summer meals, and we offered them at the parks, that we did. So again, that wouldn't have been possible without having to get to know the fire chief and saying, "Hey, fire chief, this is the program I have in my head. How do I make it?" And their answer was, "Seve, we'll make it work." And so they even left the siren on, they even left the water connector on, and all of those kinds of things. So it became a true team effort, because I didn't expect the siren to be there or the water connection to be there. But he felt that by connecting the water on a hot day, in Iowa, it's very hot and humid. So on a 98-degree day, you could connect to the fire hydrant, and the kids can have fun for a few minutes. Why not?
Yeah.
So again, it becomes a team effort. And again, this is where connecting the dots is very important. So.
Yeah, man. I don't know, as a kid, what would be more memorable than riding in a fire truck or just being around them.
Yep.
It's always, the fire trucks are over there, but if you can somehow incorporate it, like you said, with a decommissioned fire truck, you're probably inspiring future firefighters.
Yep.
It's like a win-win.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. It gets the kids outside, it gets them active. So instead of playing video games indoors, now those kids are basically, in a way, I hate to use the word forced, but they're forced to come out to the park, because we have free programs where they could learn how to play musical instruments. They could learn how to play sports, kick the soccer ball around, throw the football around, baseball around, or even do arts, hobbies, crafts, whatever, tickles their fancy, so to speak, for that day, and it was all free. That was the other big thing, so we brought the programs to them. But again, we also advertised the fact that this is a partnership with the fire department, not just Parks and Recreation. So
yeah.
So this is where the council loved it. So the council members that typically would not say anything to Parks and Recreation because they also think of it as a luxury. In many communities, Parks and Recreation in Portland maybe is a top notch, is higher than police and fire, but say Parks and Recreation, most other communities is lower down the totem pole. So how do you get that little uppance on the others? The best way to do it is have partnerships.
Yeah. And so for those of you who didn't catch the 199th episode with Dr. Joshua, who is the incoming chair of NRPA, on the episode, we officially commissioned all 350,000 Parks and Rec employees to be advocates and sales reps for the industry. So we've got to work on the messaging. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can talk about advocacy. I want to play a quick promotion for our Thursday show. And then I'll, right after that, play a quick promotion for our Young Professionals Network show. If you're a young professional, NRPA has a monthly meeting. Gabby, Vera, and Molly Keys are kind of running that ship right now. And this Thursday, they have their monthly meeting. So if you're not signed up for it, sign up for it. They have Neely Bott is going to be the speaker there, who's a big speaker in the industry. So it's definitely not something you want to miss. That's coming tomorrow. And then every Thursday we do a Youth Sports Mastery show all on Youth Sports. And every Friday we do a YPN show all about the Young Professionals Network. So I'll play these two promos and we'll come back and talk about advocacy with Seve.
At DPRS Media Co., we don't just create content. We elevate community through storytelling. Now, we're proud to introduce the newest addition to the family. Welcome to Youth Sports Mastery, the podcast where champions are shaped, not just on the field, but in life. Hosted by National Academy of Athletics founder Aaron Locks. Youth Sports Mastery dives deep into how youth sports can empower kids, strengthen communities, and build leaders. From coaching culture to recreation strategy, and from player development to parent impact, every episode brings game-ready insight from the people making it happen. Youth Sports Mastery goes live every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Only on the Daily Parks and Rec Show, sponsored by National Academy of Athletics and powered by DPRS Media Co. This is where purpose meets play.
All right, so that's our Thursday show. Every Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Host Aaron Locks, who's been at this for 40 years in youth sports, gets some of the greatest sports athletic coaches, athletic directors, officiation, like referees and stuff on his show. So that's a phenomenal show he runs. And next I'll run for our Young Professionals Network. If you are a college or high school kid looking to get into the industry, if you are a teacher or a mentor that's teaching the industry, if you are a young professionals first 5 year into the industry and just trying to figure out what's going on in this industry, there's so much to learn on day one. Or lastly, probably our most important guest on the show is if you have a internship program that you're proud of, you are more rare than you think. You might be 1 in 500. It's very hard to find a strong internship program here in America, because I have asked approaching 600 people about their internship program, and we've got like maybe 20 that are super strong that are really proud of. So if you have one, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have you as a guest on the show. Let me run this promotion for that show real quick.
The future of parks and recreation is here, and it starts with you. Welcome back to the Daily Parks and Recreation Show, where we bring you the latest insights, trends, and conversations shaping the world of parks and recreation. Today, we're diving into something that's shaping the future of our industry, Young Professional Networks, or YPN. If you love your job and love the parks and recreation community and are looking to connect with the next generation of leaders, this episode is for you. YPN is where driven, passionate professionals come together to connect, grow, and make a real impact. It's not just about networking, it's about building the future of our communities. Why join YPN? Career growth and mentorship. Learn from the best in the industry. Innovative ideas and collaboration. Be part of the next big movement. Leadership development. take charge, make decisions, and create change. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your career to the next level, YPN is your gateway to success. From exclusive networking opportunities to cutting-edge industry insights, this is where you build your legacy. Because the future of parks and recreation starts with you.
All right, so that show's every Friday, all about YPN. Okay, so let's talk about this advocacy. What does that mean to you when you are an advocate for this industry?
That you are, you take your profession very seriously, and how do you manage to or share ideas with all ages? So talking about advocacy, if I could use the promo that you just ran about the Young Professionals Network. So that's where it all begins. Even younger professionals, I would say, even high school, just being present in the high school, sharing the story, the great story of Parks and Recreation, what it brings, because that's that, getting that involvement age, where they're looking to make decisions, not just on their careers, but on their life, maybe their own personal challenges and so on. So how do you introduce them? So I think it all begins at that young age, and how do you continue on? And to the question of internships, if I could just chime in and add that
Absolutely.
For the last 8 or 10 years in the places I've worked, I've offered paid internship for 480 hours, because that's what I could typically get funding for, in most places.
Right.
But it's still a good time spent, about 12 weeks or so, to students from historically Black, historically Latino, or historically Native colleges and universities. And that's been a huge thing for us, just to open doors for communities, especially that might not even think about working in Parks and Recreation, or been even had knowledge or understanding of like, oh, I could get a job in Parks and Recreation. And so this was a good way to open doors. And then, just even, again, opening the doors to the point where they're challenged with a new project. They devise the project on their own, and they're getting paid for it, and they get to experience a new environment, and maybe their whole path might change. They might have been studying to be an accountant, but suddenly, if they got the internship, they're experiencing how they could affect people's lives, from ages 0 through 99 and so on. So part of that. So the reason I bring that up is also part of their advocacy program, because I take your words, in the sense that a good internship program is an advocacy for the profession, in the sense. And if you're not able to provide that, I'm surprised to hear in a negative way that there's only a dozen agencies that offer this, which I wish it was multiplied by a couple of zeros, that, because it doesn't cost much, actually. If you look at the big picture, instead of hiring basically one additional seasonal, you hire an intern, so to speak. So if you look at the cost, it's not that much more. But what you get out of it is that advocate now for that goes back home to, maybe they came across country to, be at your place, and, and go back home, and maybe, or stay here and be your employee in the future. I can share a great story on that. In Oregon, in Springfield, Oregon, at our park district, we had the internship program, and paid internship program. We had students, and created a connection after the first student came from Western Kentucky University, which still has the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism program. And once she came, got it, did the internship, then got a job in the fall with us, because she had just graduated also. So it kind of flowed seamlessly. And then she became the advocate for future interns. So Western Kentucky University became the pipeline for all our interns for a few years. I haven't been in touch for the last couple of years or so I don't know if that's continuing, but hopefully it does, or it still is. But in those 4 or 5 years I was there, that program continued that way, with the inflow of interns from Western Kentucky University. So again, creating those synergies is very important, and that's part of that advocacy. And again, speaking to schools, getting in front of even fifth graders, sixth graders, middle schoolers, talking about the various things that they enjoy and take for granted in their daily lives. They might go to a soccer practice at a Parks and Rec field, but not understand, again, as I shared earlier, they might think they're going to the ABC club soccer fields, but they're not, actually, because they're Parks and Rec fields. And so how do you build that advocacy and that storylines? So.
And just because I've run the Friday YPN show and heard the testimonies of the interns, let me tell you how it typically goes. I started out in pre-med because my dad's a doctor, or I started out in accounting because my mom's a CPA, and realized after a few semesters, I don't want to do that. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I shifted to engineering, and then I didn't want to do that. And by their junior or senior year, they end up doing an internship program for graphics design at a Parks and Rec, and
Yeah.
discovered Parks and Rec, shifted their whole major, went and got a master's in that, in Parks and Recreation, and that's how that leader of Parks and Rec got into it, not because they had parents in it. If anything, they had parents in totally different career paths.
Yeah.
But I don't know, for those of you who have kids, have you ever had a kid that does not walk the same path as you? And maybe you're the risk taker, entrepreneurial type, they're more of the artistic type. And they really get those first few years, the message is, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
And an internship program could completely change that, because they're exposed to so much in Parks and Recreation. And great internship programs expose them to like 15 different things, whether it's special events or aquatics, and they're able to just open their eyes to the possibilities. So, do you have anything on that as far as working with interns about how it changed their lives and their trajectory?
Well, several. The one I just shared from Oregon, and that's a great one. Actually, she's now the director of a small park district in that Springfield area, and so that's a good positive story. The other thing to share tied to this is the overall availability of Parks and Recreation degree programs in the universities and colleges. I know I did not study that. I'm an engineer too by qualification, but a lot of my friends worked in Parks and Recreation. And so I'm not to date myself, say 35 or so years ago, there were close to 500 universities that offered the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Administration program. Now, if you barely find 55 to 75 in that, they've changed the names quite a bit. So you can imagine what's gone wrong with all these programs, so to speak, because of enrollment. Again, we have not been good advocates of our profession, not told our story often enough, that kept the students going, and into those programs, and we've lost them. Hopefully they come back. Everything is cyclical in some ways. I believe that. So if we tell our story well and do it well, hopefully, the universities will resuscitate some of these programs that were the mainstays in many schools. So now the universities are pretty much on the both ends of the two coasts. There's not too many parks, recreation, tourism, and administration programs in the middle of the country, and that's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, and to all those professors and universities that are becoming regular listeners of our show, I hope that y'all see that AI is chewing up most of the degrees in colleges that you offer. And I think that one of the professions and industries that is going to be a beneficiary of this world of abundance that's coming our way is going to be lifestyle businesses. So I would put like coffee houses, yoga studios, and the big industry that works on wellness, healthcare, lifestyle is the Parks and Rec industry. And so if you're graduating students that don't have a job versus graduating students coming into an industry that's being propelled by this AI revolution, I think Parks and Rec is that industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if I could add another thing to this, the overall conversation, many a times a lot of our facilities and amenities have been in areas that are also not quite in need of those facilities. I'll use an example in the Denver area, where we ended up building 3 modern, large-scale rec centers within 9 square miles.
Wow.
So talking about advocacy, so again, in a good way, or maybe in this case, in a bad way, somebody stood in front of city council and said, we need a rec center in our community. And that voice takes over, then the funding comes in, the funding comes, through the bonding measures and all that, referendums and all that, the money gets voted in, then the facility happens. But the question then becomes, do you really need 3, say 40,000 plus square foot facilities within 9 square miles? And so that's another piece that I feel like, we do it to ourselves sometimes, that, hey, now we diluted the whole situation, where now everybody goes to the newest facility, then the older facility, falls in disrepair because hardly anyone is going there, because we are attracted to new things. That's just the human nature piece.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
How do you reverse that?
Yeah. And I think of all the states, Colorado seems to be doing well as far as valuing their active lifestyle, their outdoor living. I think of all the states I've interviewed, when I ask the question, how many miles of trails do you have? If you're a Colorado, it's almost like you're going to have 10 times the mileage of trails. something about the culture there in Colorado.
Yeah, it's the fitness culture and the wellness culture, yes, across the board, and all ages too. So, and the good thing is that, the weather, in the plains, the weather is awesome too. It's a dry, low humid weather, so you can do a lot of things year round, and especially
Mhm.
with climate change a little bit too. That when it snows, yes, it's cold, 30 degrees for a couple of days, but by the fourth day, all the snow is gone and you're back to 60 degrees, so you can be outdoors again. So that enticement is always there.
Mm.
So one example, if I could share, where this advocacy and work together and partnerships has done really well, that comes to mind, is Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Mm.
So they don't have any rec centers, the Parks and Rec department. The Parks and Rec department, there's a department, but what they do is they take over the school district buildings at 2:30. Basically, a gate comes down in the hallway to the gym side of the building. There's a small office. Parks and Recreation staff move in. So it's a good use of resources in the community. You might be challenged with budgets and so on, but guess what? You're using the same facility. So instead of locking it up and shuttering it for about half the year, so to speak, if you look at total time,
Right.
you're making that a Parks and Recreation facility, and then you still get to run your programs. You still have the kids already there. They don't have to be picked up till 6:30. You can run after school programs or actual athletic or sports programs and all of that, in that facility.
Yeah.
And that's a good way of using taxpayer dollars, I feel. And I think not just Milwaukee, but in the Wisconsin, many of the cities have done that, and they've done it very well. That we're not going to build rec centers. We're just going to co-opt, pay the school district to say, okay, we just need an electronic gate or a gate to come down in the hallway that separates the school from so the kids don't wander everywhere, but they're in
Mhm.
the gym side of things, or the athletic field side of things. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think aquatic centers are very good, I guess, metric for this, in that so much goes into acquiring the land, building on the land, maintaining these facilities. What is there a way that we can collaborate to extend the use hours of our facilities to run these after school programs even into the evening, with senior care? And then what's right under senior care? Just active adult, I think it
Yeah,
was the
active
term.
adults. Yeah, yeah.
So we're starting to, and then even having some of these outreach programs for these teenagers, which is typically a tough group to get involved. We almost like to lose that generation in Parks
Yeah,
and
and that's the biggest challenge, is the age group, about 12, 13, all the way up to 17, 18. That's the toughest group to program for, because they're also participating in high school sports or the club sports we talked about before,
Yeah.
hoping to make it to the next level and so on. But no, I think Wisconsin does this very well. I've always been impressed to how they're able to pull it. And a few other cities and towns have done that too, not to take anything away from others, but it's not a common practice, and if there was a way to do that, I think you'd build that synergy of even the young kids taking pride in the fact that, oh, I'm here all day, and this is what I come home at, say, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock for dinner, and I've learned all these things in one place, and not have to. And then it also reduces the burden on families that are challenged as far as transportation and so on. Or if you have two working parents, not having to pick up the kids from school and so on too. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we did this in Springfield, Oregon too, where we ran, actually our park district ran the after school and sports programs for all the middle schools, and the school district actually paid us to do that. So again, keeping everybody in one place, and our staff moved into the buildings, and for the specific programs that needed transportation, we provided the transportation because they paid us to take care of the programs and the kids. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll close with this. If we'll give this the Seve Ghose cheat sheet. If you are find yourself in front of a group of people that are, really maybe don't understand the value of Parks and Rec, and Seve's coming in to do your pitch for you, what is your kind of pitch deck, elevator speech, or whatever that you give, maybe in 60 seconds or a couple of minutes, where you're saying, let me try to communicate the value of Parks and Rec as an essential service, is not something that we would want to chop.
So basically, I asked the question of a 3-year-old, and then I asked the same question of a 80, 90-year-old. Hopefully they're in the same room,
Mhm.
assuming that. My hope is to get the same answer, that they do participate in something that is offered by Parks and Recreation,
Mhm.
but then not to kind of dwell on it too long, but to point out the fact that we do offer things or programs, facilities, amenities for all ages, 0 through 99 plus. So I call it the 880 principle that you might have heard, other Gil Penalosa, who does a lot of work in advocacy work in Parks and Recreation, has invented that term. So meaning anything you do for an 80-year-old should be good for an 80-year-old also, or vice versa.
Mhm.
And so that piece is my message, is that Parks and Recreation is something that's good for an 80-year-old and an 80-year-old, and we can bridge the gaps in between with other programming, and we do offer that. I think that sometimes we get taken for granted. Oh, if you need something, go to Parks and Rec. Even on the political side, it becomes like, oh, when you need the emergency preparedness site for something, or a vaccination site, oh, call Parks and Recreation. Oh, Sebi will take care of you. Go out there. But
Yeah.
the rest of the year, we're hardly talked about and all that. So how do you get in front of that? So again, getting in front of your city leadership. I mean, I've been very lucky to work for city managers and administrators that valued Parks and Recreation, and so that was a good thing, a good feeling internally, that I
Mhm.
could always go to him or her and say, this is what we're looking for. And we would get the forum in front of the city council to tell our story.
Yeah.
So my story is that we do play a role in everybody's lives, 0 through 99 plus. We do affect health and wellness. We do affect, overall quality of life experiences across the board. And we do prolong life by being outdoors and in Parks and Recreation programs, being active and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the best directors that I've had on the show, they do everything they can to get because there's only so much you can say
Yeah.
with words in a meeting. They do everything they can to get those mayors, elected officials, to the events, get
Yeah.
them to the little T-ball games, get them to the aquatic center, get them to the special event so that they can actually see what their money's doing. Because sometimes you just cannot communicate that in a boardroom setting
Yeah.
versus showing up and seeing it in action.
No, exactly. And not just what's the expression, walking the walk or doing the,
Yeah.
so I've participated, and we had our city manager. I can tell you some great stories in Iowa where he was a skateboarder. So he would show up on his skateboard at events, and that became the attraction, because people, young people get excited about seeing like that.
Yeah.
And then to then introduce himself as the head of the city, and then he getting the same questions of like, oh, what kind of work can I get in Parks and Recreation? Oh, you need to talk to Sevi. And then we both kind of get into the conversation. So you create that great dynamic for the 2-3 hour event and so on. So again, having that synergy is important, and getting people on board and partnerships and so on. It's not just, Parks and Recreation by itself. I think having those partnerships and connecting the dots is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sevi, thank you so much for coming on the show again. I always love your content. It's just decades of wisdom that you're spewing out here. And I think it's a great message for anyone out there in Parks and Recreation to kind of hear your words of wisdom, because so many great ideas here. So we'll have to continue to do this. I think we've got one probably scheduled every quarter to have you on here on the
No,
show.
happy to. And if not, let's do it. Yeah, no, I enjoy doing this. And again, this is not a one shoe fits all, or one size fits all, but we can at least have these conversations. So thank you again for the forum. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, have a great rest of your week, and keep up the great work.
No, appreciate it. Take care, Greg.
Yeah. Take care, Sevi.
Bye.
All right. So that was Seve Ghose again, one of our early contributors, one of the guys that's at the forefront of this industry that's really pushing nationwide to get the word out, to provide value and wisdom for this community, and has been hard at work at director school across America as a director, very successful and accomplished director. And so I'd love to have him on the show and contributing to it. And he's also actually helping us build out a lot of the back end stuff that it takes to build an organization like a media company, catering to a whole industry. So, man, without his wisdom and guidance, we wouldn't be far along as we can. And we do have some other people as well, like him, that's also helping us out. But thank you again for all your service, Sevi, and thanks for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts about these pretty heavy topics as far as getting Parks and Rec off the chopping board, and but also really doing the thought processes, the good mental exercises as far as what is our message, how do we reframe the conversation around Parks and Rec being an essential health and wellness services provided to your community. Because I think in that framework, we do not see this as a non-essential, but rather a very essential part of our communities that need good funding and good programming. So really appreciate that. All right, so we've got a full week's lineup, a lot of great shows coming up this week and next week. So appreciate everyone coming on to the show, creating content for facilities maintenance, leaders in Parks and Rec. We've also got our youth sports mastery. We've got last week we had our Henry County, which was the rec room. God, that is just a fantastic, a very well-run park system in Henry County, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. JP and his team does a phenomenal job. So if you can catch that monthly show, it's the second Wednesday of every month. It's always fun and entertaining, but also you get to see how a great community, a great family of Parks and Rec professionals work together to deliver the services that Parks and Rec delivers in their community. And I love how they're so super authentic. It almost feels like you're working there. So I appreciate everybody on that team. And then also we have our Young Professionals Network. Now we actually have a newsletter. We're finally getting this thing. It's a lot of technical stuff on the backside. Writing the newsletter is just one of the heavy lifts, but then getting it out, understanding the software. So we're finally getting to that, using a service called Beehive to create that. It's actually pretty good. I don't even have a referral code for any of that stuff, but just look up Beehive. I've done so much research on what's the best way to build and get out a newsletter to your community, and it seems to be one of the better ones that I've come across, and so that's the one we've kind of strapped our newsletter to. So this week we'll be sending out, I guess you could say we're coming out of that beta testing of the newsletter, and so now we're really going to start rolling it out to the 15,000 people that listen to us or consume our content for the Daily Parks and Rec Show. Appreciate all the hard work that Hannah, Chris, Kathleen, Sherry. We've also got Randy and Suzanne that are now on the team. So I think there's 7 of us full-time working on this. It really is a team effort to create something like this. It's not just me over here working on this. I'm kind of like the face of it, but trust me, there's a massive group of people, including people like Seve, that are dedicating and volunteering their time to help us do this for the Parks and Rec community. So really appreciate all the love and support that we're getting from the team. Okay, so we'll be signing off right now. We'll see y'all here again tomorrow, same time, 12 noon Eastern for our daily show. And y'all have an awesome week. Love you guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Welcome to DPRS Media Co., the first media company built for the people behind the Parks and Rec community. We don't just cover on Parks and Rec, we elevate it, we amplify it, we honor it. At the heart of everything we do is one mission: to serve the public servants, the professionals who design, maintain, and lead the parks that shape our communities. Under the Daily Parks and Rec Show, we produce 6 powerful platforms. Leadership in Parks and Rec, a spotlight on directors, superintendents, and visionaries shaping the future of public spaces. Facility maintenance, where the boots hit the ground, a deep dive into the systems, crews, and craftsmanship that keep our parks clean, safe, and beautiful. Young Professionals Network, shining a light on the next generation of Parks and Rec. Students, interns, and mentors sharing how we build a legacy together. Youth Sports Mastery, sponsored by National Academy of Athletics. This series is for coaches, parents, and rec leaders working to make youth sports fun, fair, and meaningful again. The Rec Room, hosted by the passionate leaders of Henry County Parks and Rec. This show brings frontline energy and real-life stories from the field. And the weekly Parks and Rec Post, our official newsletter delivering stories, insights, and community wins every week. We are DPRS Media Co., LLC, a media company with a mission to uplift the professionals who serve every community, every park, every day.